देश ये कभी देश इंटॉलरेंट रहा नहीं है।
कांग्रेस पार्टी ऐसी शक्तियों से पूरी ताकत के साथ मुकाबला करेगी।
The fight over tolerance, whether there is or not, refuses to go away. The Congress today fired a fresh salvo. Today, led by Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, senior congressmen marched to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, but the BJP would have none of it. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley scoffed at these calls for tolerance, saying India's always been and will always continue to be a tolerant nation. Good evening and thanks for joining us here on India Business Hour. I'm Nantara Rai. Joining me from Mumbai is Sylvie.
Hi Nandara. Well, it is a season to return awards, but guess what? Tamil actor Kamal Hassan has refused to join that bandwagon, calling it a futile exercise.
So he's joining the likes of Anupam Kher, Sylvie. But you know what? This battle, it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. On one side, people saying there is intolerance. The other camp saying that we are a very tolerant nation. But let's get back to the world of business. Here are the headlines that we're tracking tonight. The government gears up to rescue debt-ridden power distribution companies. Sources say the cabinet is all set to take up a concrete plan to restructure debt in 8 state Discoms as early as Thursday. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
We're planning to double our purchasing in the coming period.
You want to get it right rather than grow faster in India, says the global CEO of furniture giant IKEA. Plans to double sourcing in 5 years and open 25 stores in the next 10 years. That's an exclusive.
The Nifty snaps a 6-day losing streak on the 20th birthday, but markets give up gains in late trade to end marginally in the green.
Earnings recovery remains elusive. More than 2/3 of Sensex 500 companies have reported second quarter sales below expectations. Shows a Mint analysis, but companies fare slightly better on profits.
Tech Mahindra reports second quarter numbers in line with expectations. IOC, however, disappoints. Gross refining margins falling below $1 a barrel, even as crude prices gave up $12 in the quarter gone by. GAIL's second quarter is also below expectations.
The special investigation team on black money calls for a stringent crackdown on shell companies. Says more than 2,600 people are directors on boards of more than 20 companies, violating the Companies Act.
The Supreme Court lays out 4 points to reform the collegium system of appointing judges, including transparency and eligibility criteria. Rules out any wholesale changes.
Bihar elections reached climax. The high-voltage vitriolic campaigning ends for the 5th and final phase of elections. 57 seats, including the Simanchal region, will vote on Thursday.
Arrested underworld Don Chota Rajan, all set to be deported from Indonesia, could reach India as early as tonight. One of his close aides, Nilesh Padrakar, is arrested in Mumbai. Devendra Fadnavis says Chota Rajan will be arrested in Mumbai.
On the hour, India is worse than sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to gender equality. Failure to bridge the gap will lead the economy, will hit the economy by almost $3 trillion in 10 years, says a McKinsey report. Well, let's start with the market action. After 6 long days, we have finally got some green on the screen on the last street, but the bulls ran out of steam as most of the gains got paired off in late trade. The Nifty is not a teenager anymore, and on its 20th birthday, that index ended with single-digit gains. The Sensex ended with a gain of just around 30 points today.
And here's the big CNBC TV 18 exclusive interview of the day. Largest furniture maker IKEA has been sourcing products from India for 28 years but is yet to open its first store in the country. All that's about to change as the company readies itself to open 25 new stores in India by 2025. CNBC TV 18 Shireen Barnes spoke with the president and CEO of IKEA Group and began by asking just how relevant IKEA's India plans were in keeping with IKEA's global growth strategy.
The newer IKEA markets from a retail perspective are growing very fast. China, as you said, Russia. But we also see that Europe has really picked up a lot lately, and actually in euros the biggest growth last year we had in Germany. So there's actually quite a lot of positive motion going on in Europe. Then we are, of course, having a great interest in getting going in new markets, and India is more than a market, it's even a continent in a way as we see it, and we do look forward to that. It will play an important contribution on the retail side. It has been an important market to IKEA already for 20 years back, 28 years back from a sourcing perspective, and it will continue to be important there. We're planning to double our purchasing in the coming period. So yes, it is an important market, but it will become an even more important market also from a retailing perspective.
Speak to us about scaling up and expanding operations in India, because so far there have been sort of caveated comments coming in from the India team in terms of the kind of expansion that we can expect in India. I know that you're in conversation with a bunch of state governments. You could be looking at the state of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, I believe, has been speaking with IKEA as well. What should we expect in terms of expansion and in terms of store growth here?
Well, I think right now all our focus is really to getting the first store up and running, and that will very likely be in Hyderabad. It could be somewhere else, depends on the other opportunities. We are looking into different opportunities across India. We are paying special focus, I'd say, on Delhi, in Mumbai, in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and possibly some places more. And we think that we should start actually clustering our stores a bit in order to get the value chain up and running behind the scenes. So that's a little bit how we're planning the entry of the market, of course, to build distribution capacity and to continue to build the supply side, not only to fulfill the requirement of the 30% legislation. I think we have to go beyond that if we should be long-term successfully in India, and that's what we are working upon as a first step, the 30%, but also the things beyond that.
You know, speaking of the IKEA value chain here in India and the sourcing opportunity, and you said that you expect the sourcing opportunity to double. In what time period are you looking at doubling sourcing from India, and what would that mean then in terms of incremental investments here?
Well, I think, yes, IKEA is, overall, we've decided to grow. We have agreed to grow the business from about 25 billion euros to 50 billion euros.
By 2020.
By 2020, and we're on our way right now. I believe that it's not unlikely to say that we would double our purchasing activities in India by the same time frame, meaning to go from 3 to maybe 600 million euros. And of course that requires us to find the right suppliers, the right raw materials, the right competencies in order to grow IKEA in the right way. But the opportunities are here. We see a lot of engaged entrepreneurs, women and men across the country, and we just hope that we can stimulate that in the best possible way.
The number of stores in India by 2020?
Oh, it's very hard to say, but we have an ambitious plan. Well, 2020, it's hard to say. Maybe we could be at 25 stores 2025, but it's
25 stores by 2025. Yeah,
possibly, but it's a little bit early to say. I think we have to get the first, the second, the third store right and see that it works. But we have ambitious plans, and you know, we really would like to get going as soon as possible.
That's IKEA on its India plans. Now a quick check on all the earnings of the day. Tech Mahindra's second quarter numbers were in line with estimates. Profit was up 16%, driven mainly by other income and operational performance. The company's dollar revenue saw a 2.15% increase. Rupee revenue also grew by a little over 5%. Going ahead, the management expects the currency impact to remain on both the top line as well as the bottom line.
Currency impact is going to be there on both the top line and the bottom line. So from our perspective, what we actively manage is really, if I take the largest proportion of my cost and revenues, it's US dollars, GBP and Euro. So those three we actively manage through a hedging policy. But the other currencies, today they add up to, so for example, this quarter 25% of our currency exposure actually depreciated against the rupee. So we had a negative impact. But those will be always, I mean, I cannot predict, but what we would do is take always the major currencies and take a hedging policy which we have revised about last year, and we are consistent in that, and hopefully over a longer period of time consistency will pay off.
On the counter, that disappointed the street, falling crude prices did not bring any cheer for IOC. The oil and gas giant posted a net loss of 329 crore rupees in the July to September quarter on account of high inventory losses crossing 5,000 crore rupees and a forex loss of 1,100 crore rupees. Gross refining margins coming in well below its peers at 90 cents to a barrel.
From Indian Oil Corporation to the country's largest gas distribution company, GAIL also failed to meet street estimates in the second quarter after its LPG and liquid hydro segment sales fell by 20% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. EBITDA also fell by close to 20% and profit after tax grew just 4%.
And power generation company Adani Power also reported a solid set of numbers, far better than analyst expectations. Adani Power reduces consolidated net loss to 369 crore rupees in the second quarter as compared to 799 crore rupees year-on-year.
Realty major DLF also came out with second quarter numbers a while back. Its consolidated net profit was up more than 20% on a year-on-year basis. Consolidated total income, however, fell by 7.3% during the same period. EBITDA was up by 18% over last year. Well, it's a thick of earnings season, so here's some interesting analysis. Indian companies may have a long and bumpy road ahead in the search for a revival in corporate earnings. An analysis by Mint shows that market analysts may be a tad too optimistic as compared to ground realities. About two-thirds of top companies which are part of the BSE 500 have missed street expectations so far in the second quarter. Among 161 Sensex 500 companies which were studied by Mint, 108 have reported below par results and only 53 managed to beat estimates. Now let's come to sectors. Consumer goods sector has been the worst performer, with all 13 companies that have reported results so far reporting numbers below estimates. This perhaps underlines the fact that demand is still quite weak. Auto and auto ancillary companies are also struggling, with 13 out of 16 companies missing sales estimates. Pharma is next, with 13 out of 20 companies falling short of expectations. On the profit front, companies have fared slightly better. Out of 161, 86 have beaten estimates and 75 companies have missed the mark. Reduction in input costs is helping margins and hence translating into higher profits. To analyze these trends further, we've got with us Ami Shah, National Writer Markets at Mint. Ami, thank you so much for coming to our studios.
Thank you.
First glance, when I look at the numbers that you've put out, it seems to suggest to me a continuation of existing trend where companies are managing to put a tight leash on costs and therefore improve the bottom line. But top line growth, sales is just not growing.
That's right, Surabhi. That's been the trend for a while, and the demand, particularly the rural demand and the demand for industrial goods, has not picked up as expected. And that's something that we've seen for a while. We've seen GDP increasing in terms of the new series, but then the actual activity on the ground level is still very low.
Ami, if you could come in over here. Hi, this is Nantara. Could this also be a case where perhaps the expectations were too high?
Could you repeat that, please?
I was asking you, could this also be a case where you've talked about these misses? Could it also be a case where the analysts, the brokerage firms had very high expectations, unrealistic expectations?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Brokerage's expectations have been high for many quarters, and I think there could be more earning downgrades in the offing. We've had downgrades coming up in the last 2-3 quarters as well, and does not seem like there's an end to it. People are ignoring ground realities, and estimates are still very optimistic.
Ami, so just talking about the point that you raised earlier, what the GDP number is telling us and what corporate earnings are telling us, the GDP number seems to be suggesting a slight more optimism, because as far as earnings are concerned, we've been into this downgrade cycle for a while. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of brokerages on the street are already talking about further downgrades, looking at what has been a pretty disappointing second quarter. Would you call it that?
Yeah, true. I mean, unfortunately, the translation in GDP growth has not led to really a translation in markets at large as well. And also, we haven't seen concrete recovery in earnings per se. The rural growth is lagging behind, and that is where the key problem also lies. And the ground level activity, our channel checks also tell us that no, there are a lot of order queries, but are they really translating to orders? That's not really the case.
Okay, running a little short on time, Ami. We'll have to wrap it up on that note. But thank you so much for getting us all the numbers and the analysis.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So the all the economic fire engines still not firing, Surbhi. That seems to be the analysis that has been put forward by Mint. And like Ami was pointing out, one of the big reasons is also because banks are not, reducing interest rates or passing on all of the benefit to the consumers. And here's something that could actually help the Indian banking system. India's power distribution companies could get a lifeline as early as this week. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 the cabinet will take up a proposal to restructure debt this Thursday. We understand from sources the headroom under the FRBM scheme will be put to use. There is elbow room that is available at the moment. Do recall that. All loans will be converted into bonds. This move could reduce interest costs, but by at least 3 to 5%, and interest outgo will come down by as much as 15,000 crore rupees per annum. 8 states, including Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar, Jharkhand, Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, are all set for a relief. Do remember, when we had interviewed the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, he did seem to suggest at that time that it was not going to be all states needing to come on board at one time. I remember when I interviewed him at that time, he made it quite clear it was going to be a piecemeal approach. So it does seem as if these 8 states will be the first that will come on board, and if it goes through, it's a massive lifeline that will come in for the banking sector. It should also transmit into good news for consumers. Do remember there is a lag of 125 basis points in the system, which the RBI governor, the finance minister have all been saying is not being passed on, since banks are very conscious of their balance sheets. So once you see the bad debt being improved, the consumers also stand to benefit. Surbhi.
Right, Nayantara, let's move on to another story now. The special investigation team investigating shell companies has come down hard on the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It has asked the MCA to take action against over 2,000 persons who hold 20 directorships each and over 13,000 companies that share the same addresses. And that's just for starters. CNBC TV 18 Sapna Das has the story.
Arun Jaitley and the team at the Ministry of Corporate Affairs are going to be busy for a while to come as they escalate the clampdown on entities round-tripping the regulatory framework and setting up shell companies which may be used to launder money. This after the special investigation team set up on the behest of the Supreme Court has pointed out some startling statistics. In its latest report titled Shell Companies and Beneficial Ownership, the SIT has stated that 2,627 persons are directors in more than 20 companies each. And that's a violation of the Companies Act. This also means that in effect, over 77,000 companies have by default breached norms relating to directorship. What's equally astounding is that 13,581 companies share addresses with at least 19 other companies. And 345 addresses have at least 20 companies operating from them. These numbers have prompted the SIT to ask the Serious Frauds Office to mine MCA 21 data and red flag indicators leading to regulatory breach. These red flag indicators could be based on common DIN numbers in multiple companies, companies with same address or same contact numbers, companies that use only mobile numbers, and any sudden and unexpected change in turnover declared in IT returns. The SIT has also called for greater vigilance by intelligence agencies like the ED, the FIU, the CBDT, and the CBEC, and asked these agencies to share information on high-risk companies with other intelligence agencies. Violating companies can also be booked under the IPC for fraud once the investigations are complete, and the Enforcement Directorate can take action against these entities under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Going by data from MCA, the SIT report also points out that in many cases where shell companies were created, shareholders or directors have been found to be drivers, cooks, or other employees of the person or persons setting up these companies, and this may be intended to launder money. Now, the Companies Act 2013 provides for persons to declare whether or not they have any beneficial interest in the shares of a company, but the MCA has yet to frame the rules governing the manner of holding and disclosure of beneficial interest and beneficial ownership. SIT has asked the ministry to put this on top of its list of priorities. In New Delhi, Sapna Das.
And now to the big political story. Loudspeakers fall silent as the high decibel campaign for Bihar ends. The campaigning for the 5th and the final phase in battleground state of Bihar has ended. 57 seats, the highest so far in any phase, will go to polls on the 5th of November. These seats fall in the Mithilanchal, Simanchal region, considered to be a stronghold for the Grand Secular Alliance of Lalu Prasad Yadav and Nitish Kumar. Joining us to talk about the battle for Bihar is Malini Chatterjee, the editor of Telegraph, and Gautam Trivedi, the CEO of Religare Capital Markets, who's back after the extensive state trip. Malini, I'm going to come to you first. So we're going to enter the last phase. We'll all know the result this weekend. Who are you picking as the winner?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I would have been a rich person if I knew that. But I think from all the reports that have come, I haven't traveled this time myself, is that one thing is clear, it is not going to be a repeat of 2014, where the BJP swept on the back of a Modi wave. There is no wave that we saw, just a year and a half ago, less than a year and a half ago. And the other factor, which is very surprising, is that there is no palpable anti-incumbency against Nitish. So I think, as of now, I mean, the Grand Alliance
would you say
surprisingly has an edge. But when we went into the election, one assumed that, they would... BJP had the upper hand, but that's not so clear now.
Would you say this election is being fought over what kind of issues? Is it caste? Is it economics? What's the sense that you're getting?
Well, we tend to make them two separate compartments, development versus caste, but it's not as simple as that, because development itself in India is often refracted through the prism of caste. So when the lower castes, the backward castes, I think the BJP made a cardinal mistake with that RSS chiefs sort of raising the question of re-looking at reservation. That gave Nitish Lalu alliance, their own support base, who had gained a lot in the last 10-15 years, they got very scared. So, and then I think BJP also fluffed its lines in between. They started with a development plank. It was all Vikas, and suddenly they started doing this Hindu-Muslim polarization, the kind of speeches, both as senior people as the Prime Minister and Amit Shah, the BJP president. So they are banking on a Hindu-Muslim polarization, especially in this last phase, because there's a very high minority dominance. I don't think that's working. I don't think that's working.
Manini, let me also try and quickly bring in Govn into the conversation here, because the Religare team has also been traveling extensively throughout the state, speaking to different stakeholders. Gautam, what is the first-hand input that you've picked up on ground from all sorts of stakeholders, political, investors, industry, etc.?
Sure. Before I actually answer that question, I want to just, so disclaimer and full disclosure that Religare is very much apolitical, and we obviously are looking at this very objectively. Now, we were in Bihar last week for 3 days. We went to various parts of Bihar, and it wasn't just in Patna. We went to Muzaffarpur, Ara, Hajipur, and so forth, and met politicians, met businessmen, and also the common man, really, villagers as well. So this was an across-the-board tour, which we undertook with about 12 investors, and the objective of the tour really was not so much to figure out who's going to win or lose, because nobody can really predict that. But the objective really was to figure out what the issues are and which way people were leaning with respect to those issues. So then the first issue that came out very clearly was that as far as Nitish Kumar is concerned, and even after being in power for almost 10 years, of course, for about a year it was Mr. Manji, but for the 10-year period that the JDU ruled, at that point there is no anti-incumbency, which I think is remarkable. So wherever we went, we had people only praising Nitish Kumar. So he's done a great job with respect to infrastructure, law and order, and to some extent electricity. I think the area where what is his weakness, and which I'm sure the NDA is using it to its advantage, is the fact that job creation has really suffered. And honestly, over a 10-year period of near calm and reasonable prosperity, job creation actually has been very limited. So that, I think, is something which hasn't happened. At the same time, investments by the private sector into Bihar has again not happened. So these are two major issues which I think would be his drawbacks, but otherwise in general there is virtually no anti-incumbency.
Manini, let me come to the business aspect of this election, because it is the mother of all elections after 2014, and we know how keenly the market is watching out for whatever happens. Let's assume for a second that there is no sweeping Modi victory. What happens to the reform process? Do you see the central government a lot weaker if there is a defeat in Bihar?
The funny thing is, the central government, whether they win or they lose, it is not so much, of course it will embolden the opposition, but even if they were to win Bihar, let's hypothetically say that the BJP wins. It will give them a lot of confidence, but in terms of numbers in the Rajya Sabha, nothing changes for the next 2 years. So the real problem which we saw in the monsoon session, and starting with the budget session, that there's complete breakdown of relations between the opposition and the ruling party, and that has actually worsened in the last couple of months over this whole issue of intolerance and all the things that has been going on. And today we have this march by the Congress. So I think if the BJP were to win, they might have a sense of triumphalism and become even more critical and dismissive of any voices of criticism. And if they lose, then the Congress and the opposition parties get more emboldened. But either way, I think the real test of this for business reforms is how much of the two major blocs can work together in Parliament. Whatever the noise outside Parliament, and I don't see any signs of that. In fact, it's by Mr. Jaitley and the more so-called the sober elements in the government. They need to reach out a lot more. Last year they came on this huge. After 30 years, we had a single-party majority. So, but in India, if single-party majorities also cannot have their way all the time. So the real, the lesson from Bihar, whether they are humbled or they're triumphant, is that you have to reach out to the opposition if you want your GST bill passed. You have to do a lot of backroom negotiations. There is too much bitterness in the political discourse right now, and for that, both sides are to blame. But I think the ruling party has to take that extra step, which we don't see signs of at the moment.
So Gautam, come in there. You just heard Manini talk about how the legislative math is not going to change too much, that the Rajya Sabha is not going to look very different irrespective of whether the BJP loses or wins. What is the sense that you're getting? Supposing the BJP does lose, where is that going to leave the reforms drive? For example, the goods and services tax.
I think I honestly think that might actually make the reforms process faster, because the fact is that there have been increasing complaints in the press, and again, it's not us, it's the press that read about, where people think the reform process can be accelerated and should have been accelerated. And so maybe that could be, this potentially, if they do end up losing, this potentially could be a trigger to accelerate that process, which frankly I think is something which would be taken very well by the markets.
Okay, so Gautam and Manini Chatterjee on the same boat as far as this goes, that if the BJP were to lose, they'll be humbled, and perhaps we could see the reform pace actually pick up. Manini, we saw a very interesting trend yesterday, not in Bihar, but in Uttar Pradesh, a strong wave of anti-incumbency. Whether you look at Varanasi in the civic polls, where, the Prime Minister's constituency, where they lost 50 of the 58 seats. You look at Amethi, which is Rahul Gandhi's constituency, they lost all 8 seats. Mulayam Singh Yadav losing, in his constituency as well. But you're saying the situation is very different in Bihar, that there is no anti-incumbency.
I mean, that's what, Mr. Trivedi has also said. I mean, we have never met. But that is the most surprising thing, that whether it is that Nitish had a very good PR agency or whatever, but it's not just that. I think Bihar started from a very low base. And this constant thing that you hear is the cycles to schoolgirls, much better roads, much better electricity. So Indian people also, if you deliver, they do respect that. This business of that everybody.
Did he ever even tie up with Lalu Prasad Yadav?
No, I think he had to. After leaving BJP on his own, you also need a base, and I mean, politics is also about numbers. For good or worse, the Muslim minorities are at the moment all over India, particularly in Bihar, are not exactly happy with the ruling party, and for reasons that are obvious. So that chunk vote Nitish would need, and the real key would be how well they work together. I mean, Lalu cannot.
Okay, Gautam, let me quickly come to you then for the last word as far as the markets are concerned. We are already grinding down towards the lower part of a trading band. What happens? Give us your sense in both the scenarios, a BJP victory as well as a BJP loss.
From an FI perspective, I don't see investors really too excited about India, whether the BJP wins or not. If the BJP were to lose, which is scenario 2, I see the market having a reaction. Again, the extent of the reaction will be a function of how much they lose by. Hypothetically, again, this is purely hypothetical, if they get, say, 70, 75 seats, there will be a limited reaction, which would be negative, clearly. But if they end up with 110 seats and are unable to form the government, and the Mahagathbandhan ends up forming the government, I think, the market's not going to be that spooked about it. It won't be that big a deal.
Okay, so that's the likely impact or no impact of the markets according to Religare. Thanks a lot, Govn Trivedi and Malini, for joining us here on CNBC TV. To be booking you guys to come back over the weekend and discuss whatever the result is in the state of Bihar. Time now for a short commercial break. On the other side of India Business Hour Plus, the Supreme Court lays out 4 points to reform the collegium system of judges appointing judges. Details when we return.